Hi, I'm Stephanie Michelle. So today, Tuesday, August 13th, I want to consult the tarot cards regarding whether or not Iran, in conjunction with Hezbollah and Hamas, will attack the nation of Israel on Tisha B'Av, which was the date that the ancient Neo-Babylonians and the Romans destroyed the first and the second temples in Jerusalem. And some of my concerns are based upon the astrology happening right now in the skies. So here I have one of my Rider-Waite-Smith tarot card decks. I prefer to use only the Rider-Waite-Smith deck or the Thoth Crowley-Harris deck. I am still in the process of creating my own Solar Samhain tarot card deck. So, as my querent or significator card for Israel, I have chosen the Knight of Pentacles, signifying the element of earth acting in an airy fashion. Since according to the natal horoscope of the nation of Israel, their sun sign is in Taurus, an earth sign, but their ascendant is in Libra, an air sign. So, based upon this astrology, my question for the tarot is whether or not Iran, with the help of Hezbollah and Hamas, will attack Israel during this Tisha B'Av. In this case, the querent, the significator card, the Knight of Pentacles for the nation of Israel, was found in the Yod deck of the 4 decks signifying the Tetragrammaton, Yod He Vav He. This signifies Atzluth, the world of emanation or the world of fire, versus Buriah, the world of creation, the world of water, Yetzirah, the world of formation, the world of air, and Ashya, the world of making, the world of earth. So fire represents basically will, idealism, versus water, which represents emotions, intuition, versus air, which represents intellect, conflict, and versus earth, which represents security, practical matters. So these first 3 cards represent the heart of the matter. The middle card, the 6 of Swords, represents the Lord of Science, Mercury, in the sign of Aquarius. To its left, the 9 of Cups represents the Lord of Happiness, Jupiter, in the sign of Pisces. And to its right is the trump card, or the major arcana, Temperance, which represents the sign of Sagittarius. The air suit of Swords is compatible with the water suit of Cups, therefore none of these cards are interpreted in a reverse or negative manner. The trump card, or the major arcana, Temperance, however, does represent a fire sign of Sagittarius, so there is some possible antagonism between it and the 9 of Cups on the other side of Swords. Mercury in Aquarius, of course, represents kind of an eccentricism with knowledge, thinking, and of course Jupiter rules Pisces, so in this case rulership means that the energy of Jupiter, its expansiveness, its luck, its fortune, rules over Pisces, concern for others, compassion, giving. And of course, Sagittarius is very explorative, optimistic, honest, but also sometimes naive. In the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the 6 of Swords represents a real scene instead of a staged scene, where some people are traveling. It's considered a rite of passage, It's considered a sad but necessary journey card. And in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the Nine of Cups represents also probably a actual scene and not a stage scene. And it represents contentment, enjoying the pleasures of life. And of course, the Temperance card, it represents a balance of opposites, moderation, abstinence, and alchemical transformation. So regarding my query, the heart of the matter is a little ambiguous for me. I'm not ready to discard it because I think that the Six of Swords may represent just these fears of an attack on Tisha B'Av, which of course was the date that the first and second temples were destroyed by the Babylonians, the Neo-Babylonians, and the Romans. And perhaps the Temperance card mixed with the Nine of Cups represents just this kind of struggle with whether or not Israel can be secure in its borders in the Middle East. The current situation consists of the Knight of Wands, the fire sign acting in an airy manner, and to its left, the Eight of Pentacles, signifying the Lord of Prudence, the Sun, Sol, in the sign of Virgo, and to its right, the Eight of Cups, signifying the Lord of Indolence, Saturn, in the sign of Pisces. And since the sign of fire, Wands, is antagonistic towards the sign of water, or Cups, I have inverted them, which usually signifies a more negative interpretation. However, since the Lord of Indolence is already rather negative, it may actually signify a more positive aspect. I think that perhaps the Knight of Wands represents the nation of Iran, and being inverted or negative, it represents its warlike stance towards the nation of Israel, where essentially we have the Knight of Wands in combat with the Knight of Pentacles, fire versus earth, both acting in a very airy manner, meaning social conflict but not necessarily actual conflict. The Sun in Virgo, of course, represents being methodical, planning. Saturn in Pisces, of course, represents helping others in need, but inverted, negative, it may represent perhaps enabling. As I've mentioned before, I do believe that the court cards represent people, nations. In the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the Eight of Pentacles represents a staged scene with a backdrop, representing a craftsperson, hard work. In the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the Eight of Cups represents a real-life scene of sadness, rejection. So my intuition is that Iran has been planning an attack, but it seems like perhaps the plan is being rejected, maybe due to the buildup of U.S. military presence in the Middle East. So the three cards representing the future situation, if things remain the same, consists of the Knight of Pentacles, which again is the querent, the significator card I chose for the nation of Israel, which, as I suspected, is in just exposition. It represents, again, a air sign acting in a rather airy manner, kind of being diligent in its preparations for at least conflict socially, if not in actuality. To its left is the Trump card, the Major Arcana, the Judgment card, which is signifying the nature of Prime Mobile, or Pluto. And to its right is the Six of Wands, the Lord of Victory, signifying Jupiter in the sign of Leo. Pluto, or probably more accurately, Prima Mobile, because Pluto simply represents all of the outer minor planets. It represents sudden and shocking secrets or circumstances happening. And Jupiter in Leo represents courage, charisma. In the tarot, the Judgment card usually represents nearing completion, so an evaluation. And in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the Six of Wands represents success, recognition, even glory. So it seems to me that these cards represent a planned attack by Iran that is not happening now, which brings a sense of glory, evaluation for the nation of Israel. The three cards representing the choice of the matter are the King of Cups, representing a water sign acting in a fiery manner. To its left is the Trump or Major Arcana card of the Devil, which represents the sign of Capricorn. And to its right is the Seven of Wands, representing the Lord of Valor, Mars in the sign of Leo. So my intuition is that the King of Cups probably represents the United States of America, where we represent a powerful nation who is acting in a rather emotional manner, perhaps being manipulated by the nation of Israel, perhaps the Biden administration being rather manipulated by the Netanyahu regime. And at this point, I want to express that both sides, the nation of Israel with the Netanyahu regime, as well as the regime of Iran in conjunction with Hezbollah and Hamas, they all have ambitions at times of genocide, either genocide of the Israelis by these Muslim nations, or the genocide of the so-called Palestinians, the displaced Jordanians, by some of the more far-right people in Netanyahu's regime. The sign of Capricorn, of course, represents power, sometimes manipulation, but also the ability to use funds, perhaps in this case, war machines. Mars in Leo represents confidence and also just wanting to be the center of attention. In the tarot, the Devil card represents a warning against addiction, bondage. And in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the Seven of Wands represents self-defense and protecting loved ones in a real-life situation, not a stage. So again, I think this may represent the Netanyahu regime trying to manipulate the United States of America into helping it militarily in order to protect its ally in the Middle East. And sorry, in my haste, I should have reversed the Seven of Wands and the King of Cups and inverted them more negatively, which is kind of how I interpreted it, but I forgot in my haste to actually do that. Capricorn, of course, is an earth sign, so I don't see a lot of contention with it. In regards to the three cards representing the fate of the matter, we have the Trump or Major Arcana card of the Sun, which is attributed to Sol, the Sun. To its left, we have the Four of Pentacles, the Lord of Power, representing Sol, the Sun, in the sign of Capricorn. And to its right, we have the Nine of Swords, the Lord of Cruelty, representing Mars in the sign of Gemini. In astrology, of course, Sol, the sun, represents our vitality, our sense of purpose. The sun in Capricorn, of course, represents a patience, a diligence towards wealth, power, even manipulation. And Mars in Gemini represents a anxious energy, which can be rather hasty, risk-taking, and sometimes even violent. So in my opinion, this seems to signify success for the nation of Israel, for the Netanyahu regime in regards to consolidating its power and even its risk-taking activities, such as basically wiping out the entire Gaza Strip. And of course, since this was in the Yod deck, we are left with 4 cards representing the Tetragrammaton, Yod He Vav He, instead of the 5 cards of the Pentagrammaton, Yod He Shin Vav He, which are found in the 2 He decks, the first and the final He decks. And I interpret these cards rather mystically, so I try not to give any impressions to others, just keep that kind of personal to myself. But we have in the Yod position the 6 of Cups, the Lord of Pleasure, representing the sun, Sol, in the sign of Scorpio. Then in the first He position, we have the Court card of the Queen of Wands, which represents a fire sign acting in a watery manner. It's kind of a witchy card. She's got her black cat. Then in the Vav position, we have the 8 of Swords, representing the Lord of Interference, Jupiter in the sign of Gemini. And in the final He position, we have the 2 of Swords, the Lord of Peace, representing Luna, the moon, in the sign of Libra. Of course, due to the suits of Wands and Cups, fire and water being in opposition to each other, I will invert those and interpret them more negatively. And also I want to mention that while the swords and the pentacles, air and earth, are in opposition to each other, they are bounded by the sun, a trump card, major arcana, so I do not interpret those more negatively and I do not invert them. Nonetheless, as I've often stated before, unlike astrology, I think that the tarot cards often tell us what we need to hear in order to act in a certain way. I am convinced that the efficacy of the tarot is based upon astrology, but unlike astrology, which represents the actual placements of the planets, the signs in the heavens, the tarot cards are representing aspects which are not actual to the position of the planets and the stars. The astrological aspects of the tarot cards are simply symbolic and not actual to what's going on in the heavens outside. And again, I base the tarot upon Proverbs 16:33. The lot is cast from the breasts, the boobies, the seat of the passions, the desires, the hopes, the lusts, the passions, but its every judgment is from Tetragrammaton. And again, in regards to astrology, I affirm the opinion of the Talmud, Tractate Shabbath 75a, where it quotes Deuteronomy 4:6 and claims that astrology is the wisdom and the understanding of the nation of Israel that is in the visible sight of the nations of the world. Again, I do not believe in the supernatural. I believe that supernaturalism is an absurd superstition. Nonetheless, I do affirm that astrology is an algorithm which seemingly predicts the cyclical rhythms of nature and history, where, according to Genesis 1:14, I interpret the planets, the luminaries, the constellations of the zodiac as being omens or signs of this algorithm of nature and history and its cyclical rhythms, but not as the actual instigators of providence. And again, a natural providence, not a supernatural providence. Of course, in the natal horoscope of the nation of Israel, we have Jupiter at 27 degrees of Sagittarius in the third house, in a trine aspect to Mars at 28 degrees of Leo in the 11th house. The third house, of course, representing Gemini and short-term travel, daily activities, and the 11th house representing Aquarius, or large groups, social activities. Of course, in Hebrew astrology, Luna the moon represents Shekinah, the indwelling glory of God, and it is referred to in Hebrew as Levanah. And the Talmud, tractate Megillah 29a, mentions that wherever Israel was in exile, Shekinah was with them, or Shekinah in English. So therefore, in regards to the nation of Israel, Luna the moon seems to have more significance, whereas according to Hebrew astrology, Sol the sun has more significance for the Gentile nations. Therefore, it is probably significant that on October 7th of 2023, Luna the moon was at 18 degrees of Cancer in the 9th house, being in sextile aspect, or 60 degrees of Jupiter retrograde. Of course, on October 7th of 2023, Mars was actually in opposition to Jupiter instead of being conjunct Jupiter as it is now. The opposition aspect being 180 degrees, and the conjunction aspect being essentially 0 degrees, where Mars was at 28 degrees of Libra in the first house, and where Jupiter retrograde was at 13 degrees of Taurus in the 7th house. The first house of Aries, of course, being on the axis point with the 7th house of Libra. The first house representing ourselves and how we interact with the world, and the 7th house representing other people and how we interact with them, whether it be marriages, associations, legal aspects. And of course, October 7th of 2023 was the date of the horrible terrorist attack of Hamas upon innocent Israeli citizens. Today, August 12th through August 13th, is Tisha B'Av. And today, August 13th, heading into tomorrow, August 14th, the planet Mars is going into a conjunct aspect with the planet Jupiter. Both Mars and Jupiter being at 16 degrees of Leo in the 8th house. Something that will not happen again until 2033. Which is why the other night I went outside and actually looked at this conjunction just to see how beautiful and how bright these two planets appear, almost as a single star in the night sky. See that previous video of mine. And of course, the 8th house represents Scorpio, the possessions of others, secrets, sexuality, mystery, as well as aspects of life and death. And of course, Mars is the lesser malefic in astrology, representing energy, aggression, even violence, whereas Jupiter in astrology is the greater benefic, representing expansion, good luck, fortune. So the two of these together may represent the possibility of warfare. In this case, Luna the moon, or Shekinah, is at 7 degrees of Sagittarius in the 2nd house, in opposition to both Mars and Jupiter at 16 degrees in Gemini in the 8th house. And of course, Sagittarius and Gemini being access points. And the second house associated with Taurus represents personal possessions. Of course, at the same time, the planet Mercury in retrograde is transitioning from the 0 degrees of Virgo into the 29 degrees of Leo in the 11th house. And of course, the 9th house represents long distance travel and communication, such as education. And Mercury retrograde represents delays, communication breakdown, where Mercury in Virgo represents service to groups of people, whereas Mercury in Leo represents a desire for intimate situations with groups of people. In Hebrew astrology, Mars is referred to as Madim, Madim representing a double force of abundance in Hebrew. Jupiter is referred to as Zedek, Zedek meaning righteousness in Hebrew. And Mercury is referred to as Kokav, and Kokav meaning generically a star or a planet in Hebrew. The plural form Kokavim representing all planets, all stars in Hebrew astrology. Of course, whereas Mars in opposition aspect to Jupiter represents success in warfare, Mars conjunct Jupiter represents an intensity of matters about life or death. And both Mars and Jupiter being in the sign of Gemini represents a curiosity, a communication of these topics about life or death situations. And that's what has astrologers like myself a bit concerned about this situation in the Middle East between Iran and Israel, along with Hezbollah and Hamas, and also the United States of America. So in my opinion, the tarot cards seem to suggest that there will not be an attack upon Israel during Tisha B'Av. Nonetheless, as I've stated before, I think that the tarot cards, unlike the actual astrology, I think that the tarot cards often tell us what we need to hear in order to act in a certain way. The astrological aspects of the tarot are simply symbolic. Thank you for coming and watching me today. Again, in the Aramaic language of the Sefer Zohar, the Book of Radiance, Ta, Kazi, come, see. Shalom, peace.